Welcome back to The Explainer. Have you ever had a wall in your career, your relationships, or even just your personal goals, and your immediate reaction is to look around to see exactly who pushed you? Well, today we're basically setting up a psychological mirror to explore why our absolute first instinct is to look anywhere but at ourselves. We're going to unpack the fascinating and honestly sometimes a little uncomfortable research behind exactly why we point the finger. Okay, let's dive right into this. Section 1, the blame trap. So, when we experience a failure, our immediate reaction is rarely a deep, quiet look inside to figure out what we did wrong. Instead, it's usually the sudden outward burst of energy to assign fault. I actually want you to pause and evaluate your own gut reactions for a second. Think about the last time something really went wrong in your life. A missed promotion, a failed project, or maybe a disagreement that just totally blew up. In those critical first few seconds right after the failure, who was at fault in your mind? Be completely honest with yourself here. Did you immediately shoulder the blame, or did your brain instantly start searching for a culprit entirely outside of your own actions? The source material points out exactly where our brains tend to naturally go. Your boss, your parents, the system. I mean, these are incredibly convenient scapegoats, aren't they? If you didn't get the promotion, well, it's because your boss is totally unreasonable. If you have a bad temper, it's just how your parents raised you. If you can't get ahead financially, this system is just rigged against you. By projecting our failures onto these massive external forces, we completely absolve ourselves of any real responsibility. Now look, I want to validate something right out of the gate here. This habit, it's incredibly common. We literally all do it to some degree. But here is where we kind of have to drop the hammer. The source makes it crystal clear that constantly blaming others isn't just some quirky little personality trait. It's actually a massive psychological sign. It's like a bright, flashing warning light pointing directly to how our minds are functioning beneath the surface. And that reveals something very specific about our cognitive toolkit. Now, what's really interesting about this next part is how it explains that exact warning light. Section 2, Understanding Weak Metacognition. Let me introduce you to the true villain of the story here. It's a term called weak metacognition. So metacognition, simply put, is thinking about your own thinking. Therefore, weak metacognition, as defined by the text, is the complete inability to analyze your own behavior. It's a massive blind spot. When you have weak metacognition, you literally lack the psychological distance required to step back, look at your actions objectively, and actually see how your own choices led to a specific outcome. You just can't see the full picture. This sets up a really fascinating contrast. On one side, you have chronic blame shifting, and on the other, looking inward. The text reveals that chronic blame shifting is actually a highly sophisticated defense mechanism. It's a tool we use to actively avoid looking inward. Because, think about it, as long as you're actively pointing a finger outward at the boss or the parents or the system, you are completely shielded from the incredibly uncomfortable experience of having to turn that finger around and point it at yourself. So, the crucial point is, why do we even need that shield in the first place? Well, here is the harsh truth, straight from the research. Self-reflection requires effort that people simply aren't willing to give. Analyzing our own behavior is just downright exhausting. It demands intense mental effort, humility, and the genuinely painful willingness to dismantle our own ego. Our brains naturally want to conserve energy, right? And blaming someone else takes almost zero cognitive effort. Looking in the mirror, however, takes an immense amount of work that most of us subconsciously just refuse to expend. Which brings us to the final act of this explainer. Section 3, the cost of dismissal. Avoiding the mirror might feel good in the moment, but it definitely comes at a cost. And this brilliantly illustrates a stark crossroads that we all face every single day, whether we realize it or not. Option A is the path of dismissal. Option B is admitting fault. Every single time you face a hurdle, you stand right at this exact intersection. Do you take the easy way out and dismiss your own involvement? Or do you do the incredibly hard inward work of admitting fault and actually learning from it? The source material actually captures this struggle with a pretty profound observation. It is always easier to choose the path of dismissal. I want to let that sink in for a moment. It is always easier. The psychological comfort of that easy path is just incredibly seductive. You get to keep your ego perfectly intact, you get to be the victim, and best of all, you don't have to change a single thing about yourself. Then to admit you might be the reason your life is stagnant. Wow, listen to that word, stagnant. That is the ultimate consequence of weak metacognition. When you perpetually blame the outside world, you rob yourself of the agency to change your own circumstances. You don't grow. You don't evolve. You just freeze in place, completely trapped in a cycle of pointing fingers while the rest of the world just moves on without you. So I want to leave you with this final provocative thought to take with you today. Take a real look at your life right now, specifically in the places where you feel like you aren't making progress. Ask yourself, are you truly stuck, held back by immovable external forces? Or are you just avoiding the mirror? Practicing real metacognition is hard, for sure, but it is literally the only way to break the cycle. Thank you so much for joining me on this explainer today. Until next time, keep learning, keep growing, and whatever you do, don't be afraid to take a good, hard look in the mirror.